We hope that you enjoy this presentation, and we are absolutely delighted to introduce Wendy and Paul to you now.
Great, thank you, Gail. And welcome everyone to our session. I hope you've been having a fantastic time at the conference. We're pleased to be at the end of a long day, so hopefully you've still got some energy left. So I'm Paul. I do coaching in business and also do one-to-one trauma-informed coaching. I learned NLP about 10 years ago, and then I also fell in love with the elegance of clean language. So now I do quite a lot of co-training with Wendy, and together we support coaches and helping them make the difference that they want to make in the world. And Wendy, you're on mute. The Zoom's caught us out already.
Yeah, it's not a good start. I'm Wendy, and I coach and therapy and train, and clean language is the thing that I've been doing for about the last 20 odd years. So I've done a fair bit of all of those things using clean approaches. There's some clean in our session today, but you don't need to know any clean to enjoy it. So I think we should make a good quick start. And our session is about mind scams, which is about how your mind tricks you into doing things that it would like to do right now, no matter what your longer term goals might be. So in this session, we're going to discover the specific mind scams with which your mind tricks you. And find out, how do you distract yourself or ignore a key truth? We're going to have a look at your hidden patterns. So anytime you can spot a pattern, you can get more for your efforts by working at a pattern level. And we want to offer a new way for you to tackle those outcomes you have that keep eluding you, or in fact your clients. And we will offer you a practical process to use straight away in your coaching towards the end of the session as well, in what we're going to do with your mind scams. So we've got no lack of interesting stuff to do. Would you like to take over, Paul?
Yeah, so and this is something we modeled ourselves. So anyone who watched that introductory video will know we ran into so many mind scams ourselves, and we've been looking at what we actually do. It's been a horribly painful experience, but it has actually led to quite a noticeable difference in our efficiency that's continued ever since. So we can say from bitter experience of mind scams, it's something very worth looking into and doing something about. So throughout this session, the session kind of holds together as a whole, and what we'll be doing is inviting you to discover your own mind scams. So throughout, like starting in just a second, we'd encourage you to have a piece of paper and to be noting down any examples of your own mind scams and how you do them. And I'm just going to talk you through something now to get started. So if you've got a pen or pencil and some paper or something electronic at the ready, get ready to notice anything you notice. So I'd like to invite you to think of some examples of when you've been committed to something and it ought to be easy to do, but you didn't do it. And then you repeatedly don't do what you're committed to, and actually you're still not doing it. And think of some examples that mainly involve just you. So for example, you might have decided that you're definitely not going to eat a whole chocolate bar in one go. And now that is something we can all easily do, right? Not eat a chocolate bar in one go. I've certainly never done that myself. So this is a kind of example. So think of 3 examples, and if you can come up with different kinds of examples, that will help at the pattern level. 3 examples of things that ought to be easy to do. That could be things you can't seem to change that are around eating or drinking, things around exercise, things about your sleep, your work-life balance, maybe about how you use your phone or the internet or social media. These are all great topics for things that should be really easy to do something, and you probably find yourself doing things you don't plan to be doing. Another good one is anything that's on your New Year's resolution list. It's still on your New Year's resolution list the next year. So for purposes of today, don't pick anything that's got a deep underlying issue. Use things that you can use in an exercise, because we're going to ask you to put them down and change to be a facilitator, kind of at a moment's notice. And so if you can find 3 examples like that, write them down, and as we go, just keep updating those examples, or pick a different one if something more relevant to you comes up, and start to add in how you might be fooling yourself. So as we talk through different kinds of mind scams, how they work, you can use these examples and to jot down how you fool yourself, and later on we're going to use that information in the activity. Wendy, you're on mute again. Back to your session.
Yeah.
How to remember to come off mute on Zoom.
You're right, yeah. Okay, so the more general pattern of what we're going to be doing in this session is we've got a bit of background information just to get you really thinking about the topic and how it affects you. Then we'll do an activity where you'll be with 2 other people, modeling your own mind scams, and then listening in and building a model of theirs. Then we'll debrief that, and then do a kind of action planning piece for how you could go about deciding what you would like to do differently with something or other that's affecting you in the way of mind scams. And we will debrief that. And along the way, we'll give you a chance to ask questions. And by then, we reckon it will be time for us to stop. We've already been told there's no way we're allowed to go over the time. So we will definitely be finished by 8. So let's make a start then on the background information. I've got a feeling that Paul has something to offer with this, but just generally, mind scams mostly happen when our minds are anticipating the possibility of getting some instant gratification if they convince us to not do what we are committed to doing. So, you know, when you are intending to have one soft drink and then a friend offers to buy you a double whiskey, and suddenly anything about not drinking that night goes out of the window as your mind spots this excellent opportunity to have something that, according to some people at least, is delicious. If not anticipating instant gratification, then it can be that you do take mind scams start happening in order to put off or avoid a task that your mind thinks is going to be effortful or painful or just really boring. Apparently, we experience boredom as pain, so it makes sense that we'd be keen to avoid those tasks. But at the same time that you're wanting to do that, you don't want to look like a pathetic individual who, you know, can't keep track of not drinking alcohol tonight and falling for a double whiskey that's being offered. You have your pride to consider, and you don't want to look pathetic in front of other people. So again, if you can somehow make it look like you are behaving like a rational human being, that's kind of first prize. And mind scams serve in ways to help that happen, help us feel good about ourselves and present a reasonable appearance to other people. So there are always going to be conflicted and hidden motivations involved where mind scams are at work. And that also comes with a big dose of self-sabotage. And it's you who will end up paying what could be quite a big price for that self-sabotage. So all of the mind scammy stuff helps us to kind of cover up that we're trying to not take responsibility for our actions and for our outcomes. It seems that we can put the ways that we manage to do these mind scams under the good, well-used NLP headings of deleting and distorting and generalizing. So, Paul, I think you said you were going to be doing something about that.
Yeah, before we do, I just want to say in the session, we're going to do 2 key NLP things.
Oh, sorry. Yes, we must say that.
We're going to be, in terms of our skill sets, we're going to be looking at modeling and pattern spotting. And these are things we particularly love in clean language as well. So modeling means that we're listening to our clients. We're actually trying to work out what must be going on for that client. What's their model of the world really like? How does it work? You know, with a lot of curiosity. And we build the model ourselves so that we can ask a really good question. So the more we can make some sense of their world, the more we can ask a really good question about it. So we're going to be encouraging you to do modeling. And as we already said, we're going to encourage you to do some pattern spotting as well. So are there mind scams that just come up again and again? This is based on the notion, this session is based on the notion we've got a small number of favorite strategies and we use them in lots of different situations. So that's why we've asked you for 3 different kinds of examples of these situations that, you know, where something ought to be easy, but it's not. And we'd be encouraging you to look to see if there's common patterns in the way you're extracting yourself from your outcomes. The thing is, if you can spot a pattern and you can address, do some kind of intervention or really get to understand that pattern, it then has an effect across many aspects of your life, not just the one you're looking at. So these are really core skill sets. We're going to go through a number of commonly found patterns, and we're going to share some in a second. But what I would say, we're all very unique. So whenever we've got any of these generalizations, just really understand your client, yourself, you're unique. The ways you do what you do are unique. And so you're the only one who can decide what's going on for you. And actually, if there's anything that you'd like to do differently. So.
Okay, so just to make it that much better, while we go through some of the common patterns, and just to remind you, if any of them seem to be things that you do in relation to any of your 3 examples of mind scams, then make yourself a little note so that you've got that sort of the front of your mind when you start to work on them. So Paul has, to help us go through the section, prepared some lovely slides for us. And you can see what he's written. He would absolutely, definitely write the slides explaining mind scams to all the lovely NLP people. It's a measure of his commitment to our working relationship and very heartening. So let's see the first of the slides. Oh dear. It appears that Paul has been doing some deleting, and that fortunately happens to be the first of our things that we're going to mention. So the sort of things that happen with mind scams as far as deletions are concerned is ignoring important key truths. And the thing that's quite useful to realize is that ignoring seems like you just don't put attention there. But actually, Robert Trivers says, when you want to deny reality, you've got to act quickly and get it out of sight. So ignoring something really takes some effort and some fast footwork to manage to not put attention on it. So typical things that you might hear someone saying is, I just forget to go and exercise. I didn't realize, blah, blah, blah. I don't know how that happened. Or you might have them say, or you might find them or yourself putting your outcome behind you rather than where you can see it. Or classic, put it to one side. And I'm gesturing because although there's no physical outcome to put behind or to one side, that is actually in the way that we're thinking and processing. It's exactly what we do. And if your attention is full on in front of you and the things off the side, then obviously you're going to forget and not notice and so on. So there's also the thing about having a blind spot, you know, out of sight, out of mind, all of that. But you can't just do it with visual stuff. You've got to make sure that you don't get reminded through your other senses. So we also talk about turning a deaf ear to something. And of course, this deletion thing also involves distracting yourself. The sorts of things you do with 2-year-olds, you know, who are about to start having a tantrum. And you say, look, a bird. We do that to our own attention to help us ignore things that are not things we really want to pay attention to. So this is another little quote. For a system to recognize what to avoid, deny, or mislead, it has to maintain knowledge of what to avoid, what it knows is true, that is, and it has to deny the thing. In other words, deceiving ourselves requires that we both know and not know something. So it's a really, you know, pretty energy consuming process. Okay, so that's a quick little hop, skip, and jump across deletion. So, Paul, how about the slide for the next bit?
Yeah, well, obviously after demonstrating that I obviously have some mind scans around deletion, and obviously I can now feel my tribe together on the Zoom call, all the other people who've ever deleted anything. You know, I think we can stand together in this. That's it. You know, I now know what my mind scans are. There's definitely never, ever, ever going to be any problems with my slides ever again. And I have prepared the next one, fortunately. So that's really good.
Oh dear. It seems that quite a lot of distortion has gone on here. And a typical thing when we distort stuff, as we do with mind scams, is that that we scale things wrongly. So we make things seem too small, too quick, too lengthy, too effortful. So you find people saying things like, it's just a little cupcake, you know, while trying to lose weight. That just starts the thing going. It's the classic word that tells you people are downgrading the effect of the thing they're talking about. Or distorting time is a popular one. You know, that would take far too long. There's no way I've got time to start it now. Putting things off. You can distort consequences. You know, it won't matter if I just miss today's gym session. Not thinking about the fact you missed one last week and you're going to miss 3 next week because you're going to be away on holiday, and by the time you add up all the missed ones, it really will matter. It will make a difference. Another way you can distort things is deliberately not making a cast iron commitment to something. So arranging it so that you've got some wriggle room to do what you oughtn't to do. And a final one we wanted to mention is the ability to make everything a bit hazy, a bit foggy, so that you're not fully experiencing the effects and the consequences of what you're doing. That's quite a nice way to just travel through being able to feel all right about yourself. As a little quote, lying to ourselves is more deeply ingrained than lying to others. And we're in the territory of lying to ourselves.
And many of these distortions are about scale. And David Grove, who created Clean Language, said in some instances, the problem is resolved when all that has changed is that the scaling is now all life size. It's just interesting to note how many of that. We were quite surprised actually when we did the list, how many were about scale, but of different things: scale of time, scale of space, scale of consequence.
Definitely one to look out for.
Yes.
Okay, we got one more category. Have you done the slide for the next bit, Paul?
Well, I think I've learned my lesson. So obviously, I did have a few mind scans around distortion. I know there's probably a few other people on the call, and they've been like me, jotting them all down. But I'm now fully cured. I'm a completely brilliant slide creator. No more excuses. Oh, I've just sent you an email, Wendy.
Okay.
Dear Wendy, I absolutely definitely will have really high quality mind scan slides for the lovely NLP people. But my cat won't take no for an answer, and I really must update his Facebook profile now. Best wishes, Paul.
Right, okay, so you can see how very thoroughly Paul is doing self-delusion and the likes with slide making at any rate. So this is us then moving on to thinking about generalization, the third classic NLP filter that gets mentioned. So we're focusing on beliefs in this section, which, as the NLP Encyclopedia says, are closely held generalizations. And what we're tending to think of them as is convenient beliefs for why you can't or shouldn't do what you need to do for your outcome right now. So I can't exercise now, I must clean the oven. Well, I mean, cleaning the oven's very virtuous, isn't it? So, people are only going to look at you with admiration if you're cleaning the oven rather than doing the exercise that you are supposed to be committed to. Or it'd be rude to refuse a fourth glass of wine when someone's offering it. So you don't want to be an impolite person. So obviously, you didn't want the wine, but you'll have to drink it because that's the polite thing. Or I've had such a bad day. I deserve to put my feet up now. Again, poor you, victim of a hard day. And so no one is going to complain if you then spend the evening with your feet up on the sofa and, well, probably drinking wine and eating chocolates and whatever. Or I can't resist when there is a chocolate hobnob to eat. Again, it's kind of, oh, poor you. It's completely beyond what you can do. We all feel for a victim. Or I have to, whether it's clean the oven or something else. You haven't got any option. I mean, you'll recognize those from other NLP contexts, I'm sure. And so we cast about and find these convenient excuses, these convenient truths, not to get ourselves and others to kind of buy into our spin on the situation. So have you got anything to add to this, Paul?
No, I'm just going to say, well, hopefully you've been spotting some of the things you do and jotting them down. In a second, we're going to do an activity to explore that more. And what we're doing is trying to take the examples that you've got and start now to look at what's going on underneath. So hopefully from those sections you've picked up some of the fun ways, the main scams in which you don't do things that you would like to be doing. So what we're going to do, as I've humiliated myself terribly with all my slide shenanigans, is I'm going to hand over to Wendy so that she can do the same in front of you.
Okay, so this is a quick sort of a absolutely real example of mind scam, so that you just get a bit more of the flavor. And it absolutely genuinely came from the last live NLP conference in London. I had decided I was not having dessert at lunchtime because I was having dinner out with friends. I wasn't going to have space for dessert there as well. So it was decided no dessert at lunch. I went to lunch and got myself some nice healthy salad, but there were a lot of people around. So the quickest way to get to the seating was past the desserts. And I can almost look you in the eye and say that that was true, that that was the least blocked way through. So obviously I looked at the desserts as I went past. I mean, why shouldn't I? And I saw that they had creme brulee. I have a long history with creme brulee after a hotel in France about 30 years ago where they had divine creme brulee. I've been looking for another one like that ever since. But I decided I wasn't eating dessert. I went and I had my salad. I finished my salad. I went to put my plate down. It happened to be somewhere near where the desserts were that you put your used plate. And then I honestly don't know how it happened that I went past the desserts. I don't know whether it was busy via the other straighter route, but I went past the desserts. And you know what I found? There was no more creme brulee. It had been eaten by people, and the hotel had not topped it up. So I went on my way, and I tell you what, for at least half an hour, I was really, honest to goodness, put out that there'd been no creme brulee left. So if you think about all of what I've said is 100% true. And if you think about what must be true for what is true to be true, there's something else going on here. You don't get annoyed about something that's not available to you when you don't want it in the first place. So clearly part of me had decided I just might have some creme brulee. And if there had been creme brulee there, I've thought about this, I reckon what would have happened is I'd have said, this looks good. Creme brulees are hard to get at, they're scarce. I'll just, that word, have a little one. After all, I only had salad for lunch, which is very virtuous, as everyone knows. And I might not have chosen the very biggest one, but I wouldn't put, I mean, I think it was a done deal. I'd have had one, and it probably wouldn't have been the smallest one, and I'd have eaten the whole lot. So you can see how there are a number of things going on here, sort of deleting information about why I took that route, distorting stuff. Well, this is the best place to take the dirty plate. There were other places I could have dropped it off. All these convenient excuses that were just piling themselves up, ready to be unleashed at the right moment. And then the complete frustration that they weren't needed. So it's not like you only do one thing when a mind scam activity kicks in. So keep your eyes and ears and feelings out in all directions to spot the range of stuff that you do so that you can start getting a handle on it, if you wish to, of course.
Good. So we're going to start getting into some activities, but we've got a little exercise to do now, just taking some of your examples. So one of the things about mind scams is they're about what's happening right now, quite often an instant gratification or something that you could get in the moment, compared to something that might be happening a bit more in the future. So we'll just do a little exercise just for a few minutes, where I'd invite you to take each of your 3 examples and to ask the question that you don't do what it is you ought to do, then what happens? And ask that question 4 times for each thing. So then what happens, and then what happens, and then what happens, and then what happens. So just take a few minutes. So take one example, ask yourself the question 4 times, write down the answers. Take the next example, question 4 times, and write down the answers. And if you've got time, do the 3rd example as well. And we'll just give you like a couple of minutes to do that. Okay, had a few minutes to explore what happens. That's a little clean process using a clean question repeatedly, so we can try and travel through time to explore some of the consequences. So we'll just hold that, find out what you found out about what happens, and we're going to talk through the next activity, which Wendy's going to brief you on. Oh, mute again, Wendy.
Okay, so you've had a chance to do the then what happens and then what happens. And what we want to do now is move on to the sort of main kind of activity that we're wanting to do, which is in breakout rooms, in threes or so, to have a chance to explore your mind scams. So with clean language, we go in for building sort of sophisticated models of how our client does their experience, so that we can ask sort of very elegantly simple questions. And to get to be able to do that, we do quite a lot of practicing of musing, which is thinking about, perhaps talking to someone else about how a client's world works. So doing this with someone else is a good way to learn that craft. So we're going to do that in this activity. The nice thing about it is it can be good for polishing up your modeling skills, but clients really like it. They really get a lot, generally, from just listening to two facilitators talking about what they're noticing and what seems to be going on, and so on. So the client isn't part of the deal. They listen in, but the conversation is between two facilitators, and we want to do some of that today. So what we're going to do is we're going to have about 25 minutes in total, divided between the 3 people on the call in the breakout room, which means about 8 minutes per person. And there are 2 parts to the activity, as you can see on the slide. And we're saying split the time more or less equally. So about 4 minutes for part 1 and 4 for part 2. So part 1, the client tells the 2 observers, they are observers rather than facilitators in this case, about the patterns they've spotted, and about how they don't do their outcomes. So it's a chance to download all the bits and pieces you've been making a note of. And obviously, as you do that, you'll probably have some more insights, and you can scribble them as you're going as well. The observers just listen and watch. And what they're thinking about is, how is the client doing their not doing? So what are they, what hoops are they jumping through so as to not do the thing that they committed to doing? So the client's going to talk about all 3 of their examples, and the observers listen. And then after about 4 minutes of that, part 2 starts, where the observers are going to muse with each other. They're going to talk about what they've noticed about what the client does to not do their outcome. So, if you'd heard that I was put out about there being no creme brulee, and I hadn't said anything further about that, you'd be talking to the other facilitator person, saying, oh, why should she have been upset about that? There has to be something else going on here. So you're kind of a bit detective-y. You're aiming to spot anything else that might prove to be something that the client hasn't yet realized, that might be adding to the number of mind scams that they experience. And so come at it from any angle you can as to what the client hasn't yet noticed about how they do their not doing. You have got a handout, or you should have a handout that has some examples of the patterns. So you can, of course, use those as well, but don't limit yourself to something that's on the handout. And bear in mind that the client is the expert on their experience. So after you've when you're doing your talking to the other person about the client, kind of be a bit humble and phrase your conversation as, I'm wondering if she might have gone ahead and had some creme brulee if it had been available. Not there's no question she would have. So do it as, I'm wondering, could it be, that sort of tone. So it's kind of cleanish in its nature. And if that doesn't make sense to you, don't worry. You don't need to know about clean. But you don't include the client in your conversation. They don't butt in and interrupt. They just listen and they write down anything extra that they get from that, anything that provokes some more insights. And at that point, after 8 minutes, swap roles quickly. So what we're going to suggest is that you self-manage the time. So you've got 25 minutes in all. And please do all you can to, give each person a good turn. Okay. I think unless there's anything that anyone needs to ask.
So Wendy, if I can just jump in there for a moment. The handouts are in there. There seems to be a glitch with the setup for some reason. So if you're looking for the handout, if you could look in Hoover down your left-hand side for the documents tab, and you will find it in there if it's not appearing underneath the session now.
And I'll say you only need the handout if you've already been following along. If you've already got some mind scams written down, you don't need the handout. It's fine. They're just to provide some extra examples. So what I've also done, I've just put, because I don't think this slide will follow you through. So if you want to take a screenshot before you go in the room or photo, point. You can. But I've also put all the instructions into the chat as well. The chat on Hoover's got everything from the slide in it. So yeah, so don't worry about the handout. It looks like there's some problems with that. It's a distraction. You should be able to do the activity off of everything you've noted down so far. Right, welcome back, everyone. I was waiting to see. Yeah, we've still got a few more people coming back.
A few more people coming back.
Yeah.
Probably got about 7 or 8 seconds.
There we go.
Excellent. Okay.
Right, so I hope that was got some interesting things from that. What we'd like to invite you, we're going to do a debrief in a second, but just to prepare for a little activity we're going to do in a moment as this is all fresh in your minds. I'd like to invite you to spend a minute or two choosing a couple of outcomes with respect to your mind scans and your patterns. Now, and if you've spotted a pattern, what we'd invite you to do is create an outcome around the pattern, not the original mind scan. Sorry, not the original situation. So for example, if you've worked out that there's something you're supposed to do and you keep making excuses, maybe your outcome would be, actually, I'd like to stop making excuses. Or maybe you noticed there was like sometimes people, it's almost like there's two voices or two different aspects of them. And maybe you might have something like, well, I want to pay attention to the wise voice that I usually ignore. That would be an example of an outcome. But it's more at this kind of underlying pattern level. Or maybe it's something you put further away, like maybe the consequences somehow you hold off in the distance. You might say, well, I want the consequences of slipping or not doing to be closer to me. So just a statement, something you'd like, ideally with respect to that kind of slightly underlying level of what's going on under the surface. And we'll use that in the next exercise. It'll take a minute or two. And you only need one outcome. Okay, we're going to do just an ever so quick debrief. So if you haven't got an outcome, you can carry on thinking of one in the next few minutes. I should point out, Wendy and I have an absolutely standard piece of distortion that we always do, because somehow we imagine we can put far more in a session than is actually possible. And despite the fact we do it every single time, it still happens. So yeah, even people who've looked at mindscams for the last year or so are doing the same thing. So we are running a tiny bit behind our schedule. So we'll do a very quick debrief just for a couple of minutes and get a few things about what's happening and then move on. So anyone like to share what's been happening? Anything particularly interesting happen? Something interesting you've learned? Particularly at that underlying level, like how are you doing the mind scams?
Just to jump in, if you'd like to share, can you raise your raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen so we can spotlight you?
Debbie
got a hand.
I was going to say, this is a good time to distort the fact that there's like 46 people on the call and imagine it's just me and Wendy having a chat too.
Thank you. That was a really, really interesting exercise for me, because there were some really clear patterns around the fact that I distract. I basically have things that I know that need to be done, but all of a sudden these things over here need to be done so much more now. So I constantly distract myself with the things that are always going to be there, the irrelevance of, you know, the washing pile and the cleaning the fridge or whatever it is. But actually what I need to start doing is making the commitment to the things that I know need to be done and organising them and putting them in a time space in my week and putting them in my diary so that I'm committing to them properly, rather than just knowing I need to do them at some point. That's quite a revelation for me.
Okay. And did anyone just notice when Debbie said about there's those things over there? She did this gesture. So from a bit of musing, here's an interesting question. Well, I wonder if there's something about that location where those things are and where the other things are. That might inform a question a bit later on if we were facilitating. So thank you very much, Debbie, for sharing.
Thank you.
It brings to mind someone with whom I was working who said he daily put time aside for going for a run, and he just wasn't getting around to running. And what came out of it in the end was his attention is center front through the day, and he had put time aside to one side of him. And so, of course, he didn't notice that he needed to go for a run because he's not looking to the side of him. So I think what Debbie was saying with her gesture way to one side of her, I don't know, but it would be a possibility to consider whether that time space that you're wanting to sort out for the things that need to get done, whether there's some reflecting on where physically is your attention, and how can you put that time space within that I don't know, my words, sort of searchlight of attention.
And that is really interesting, because where the things that I want to do, so the meditation and the journaling, I said were over here, which was my diagonal to the front, and the things that I end up doing which are irrelevant I put over there, which isn't in my vision. So yeah,
in fact,
really
it's diagonally opposite. It's as much out of your sight as it can possibly be.
Very interesting, thank you.
Excellent, have fun.
Thank you.
And Good. We have one other hand up, but sorry, we can take it if anyone wants to do that. Case. Yep. If I pronounce your name right. Hiya.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. No, that was a great exercise, and kind of listening to two other people talk about you as you weren't there was quite brutal.
Oh dear.
So that, but no, it was brilliant as an awareness raising exercise, and it does allow you to look in as the observer listening to the conversation as, wow, okay, this is my pattern. So mine was constantly sort of in the now, but applying things that used to be in the past. So it was taking the past and inserting that now, so that it applied to now, even though I know that's not the case anymore. So I suppose my outcome really is taking responsibility for what's in the now, what's ahead of me, instead of what's back there. So yeah,
fantastic.
Very interesting, but brilliant exercise.
And you know, this thing of putting oneself in an observer perspective, which basically people were obliged to do when they were listening to conversation, couldn't say anything. That's a perspective people often don't take when they're doing mind scams. Their attention is all on, you know, what can I get that's nice and saves me from having to do something I don't want to do right now. And it's all kind of based on, you know, seeing things through their own eyes and all that. So your comment about that thing of being the observer in the conversation, actually all by itself is also a possible resource for some people that they might like to use in overcoming their mind scams. But
Yeah,
nice example, your one, nice one.
Yeah, it was a brilliant exercise. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. As the observer, listening to what was being said about you, it was like you were a fly on the wall. You know, those conversations, sometimes you catch earshot of, you're like, is that about me?
Yeah.
And it was. So yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Brilliant, nice example. Thank you.
Cool, thanks for sharing. Okay, right, so we're going to go into another little activity. I think hopefully we're going to go back to the same breakout groups for this. And what we wanted to do, so one of the things, again, it's a bit of a clean language thing we do. We're usually trying to support people in how they want to apply clean in context. So we quite often are using clean language questions and then designing little what we call applications, like how you might use it. If you're interested, Wendy can say more about this, but she and some other people designed a little application for Weight Watchers a while ago. So it was how can you teach a coaching process to people who aren't coaches and actually don't have very much time to do a coaching process, but so that they could help people at Weight Watchers to lose more weight. So they designed this little process that was 5 questions, I think. Anyway, so we've about that. So this isn't it. It's based on it. Well, what we've given you is effectively a little script. So what we're going to suggest is you go back into the breakout rooms. Everyone's got an outcome already, but actually the first question as a facilitator, someone picks a client, one of the other people in the group be a facilitator, ask that first question, which is like, and knowing more about your patterns, and what happens next, and then what happens if you keep your patterns. Oh, sorry, I put the abbreviation. What would you like to have happen? I'll change that slide. And whatever they answer is the outcome. Sorry, that's me doing clean language abbreviations and forgetting to update the slide. So what would you like to have happen? And then you follow the script. So whatever they answer will be their outcome. Maybe I want to stop making excuses. So what's important to you about stopping making excuses? And then what's important to you about that answer? What's important to you about that answer? You can just follow the script through. And then the next person can have a go. So it's a nice little scripted coaching process that you can do quite quickly. I thought we'd hand that to you. Wendy, I'm going to paste it into the chat, but I kind of have to do it line at a time. So it'll take me a short time to do it. Wendy, do you want to say anything else? Anyone heads off?
Well, we're going to give you 5 minutes per person. So that's going to be 15 minutes in total. So again, manage your time and swap around after 5 minutes. If you find yourself with any extra time, so the person's answered all the questions in less than 5 minutes, you could ask them a classic clean question, which is useful for everything under the sun, which is, and is there anything else about, and a word that they've used. So any word that you think is important, that might have more information in it, you can ask. Is there anything else about in the present, let's say, rather than in the past, if they talked about being in the present. So you can fill in any spare time you have. And just notice it's what's important to you. It's not why is it important. You've got a much better chance of getting an answer that relates to their values if you ask what's important. If you ask why, you can land up getting explanations and kind of excuses and whatnot. So just ask that question as what's important. Are you nearly there, Paul?
I think people can go because I've got the first 4 questions in the chat. Okay, I'm back. Look, Wendy back, that's the important thing. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Very good. So we'll have a little debrief. So anything interesting happened? What did you learn? You'd like to share? Oh, Claire.
Hi.
Hey, Claire.
So I'd actually be really quite interested because obviously we got to a point where we didn't quite get to the end result. And I think, Wendy, you were just picking up obviously what, in terms of the person not necessarily feeling quite as committed to the end action. So I suppose if that happens in reality, what would you do?
Yeah, so I think that's it's a really good point. So I think we can share this without using names, so that should be fine. So we had that, well, then I'd be more organized and hopefully, complete with a hand, hopefully get more things done. I'm a bit hazy about it. And then a laugh at the end, hopefully get more things done, haha. So all of that sounds like we may not have a done deal here. There's, some of that sounds a bit mind scammy around the edges. Laughing about it, saying hopefully, which suggests they're not too certain that it'll actually happen. Being hazy about the consequences. Being hazy is a good way to do mind scams. I know because I specialize in it. So if this was happening in a real session and you had more time, what I think I would do would be to actually go back. First of these things that I've mentioned was the not clocking the consequences. I'd probably stop the process there and ask, and when you're not clocking the consequences, what would you like to have happen? So give the person a chance to do a bit more thinking about that, a bit more exploring. I'd probably ask them, and is there anything else about that not clocking consequences? So put some attention there so that the person could start to know more about it. From a clean world, one gets keen on using people's metaphors. So, one might well go for a metaphor for some of this stuff. So, it's like what? Because that can make it easier for people to work on things as well. And in terms of the, I'd be more organized and hopefully get things done. I would probably be asking maybe only hopefully, or what kind of hopefully is that? Or as something to to give them again a chance to notice the implication of what they've said. If you say it quickly, it sounds like a nice thing, you know, to be doing something, hopefully. It's only if you skid to a halt and think for a moment that you start to realize that it actually means there's some doubt in the matter. And, you know, are you going to go ahead with the doubt, or are you going to do something to address that? And with the laughing, I think a question that you'd been asking about something else, but earlier in the session, which is, and where did that laugh come from? So kind of, again, kind of look at what's behind it, or whatever that might be generating it. And do the whole lot with a bit of a little smile and a whole lot of sort of compassion, because we all know that we've all been there.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Wendy.
Yeah, no, I'll mention in that, because I joined one of the breakout groups. It's interesting how slippy the mind scams can be. Like they're basically going along. I'll name the facilitator, because she did a great job. Jackie caught a thing right at the end with the and can you do X? And the person we were with said, oh, it's on the to-do list. So she repeated the question, and can you do this? So actually, even in that one, right at the beginning, there was a thing to do with distractions, and we went through it, and it looked like this really lovely sort of little plan going on, but you're sort of being a bit skeptical about, I wonder if these distractions are going to come back. So that's why we encourage, we've given you really a script here, but actually in terms of really facilitating this, you've got to absolutely have your wits about you as a facilitator, in terms of like all the things Wendy was just saying. Are there more mind scans? What's actually happened to that underlying process that someone does? You know, if it's another, you know, particularly parts, we do quite a lot of stuff with parts work. So, you know, if you've got an aspect of you, like a voice or a part or something, and then somehow that's not getting listened to in the answer, you know that's coming back somehow, one way or another, as a facilitator. So yeah, so how do you help the client to kind of notice all the aspects and kind of get some kind of agreement going on between them? So yeah, it's fun as a facilitator doing this. So any other sharings? We had a couple of nice comments in the chat. If anyone wants to add something to those.
I'm going to add a very quick thing about that little process that you were using, which is that clients can't be relied upon to answer the question you've asked. So as with what's in the to-do list, not actually an answer to can you do it, you always want to be carefully working out whether you've just got an answer to the question you asked or not, because they may have given you information that relates to, you know, another bit of the process, one of the other questions, in which case you'd want to just skip along to the relevant question for where they're paying attention and ask that question. So it's written in a sort of linear way, but that's not necessarily the way it'll play out with a client. You may need to jump back and forth to you know, get so that they've paid attention to all the bits and have got a reasonable go at doing what they're wanting to do. Paul, we have got problems in that I said earlier I couldn't get anything in the way of the chat, and I'm not alone. So we do need to have a little think about how we can get this information to people. So that they have it. I mean, be a pity if they didn't have that little process. That's a good little, full, tiny coaching process that you can use for, you know, problems that are not enormous. Yep.
Okay. I'm sure technically there's a way of getting it up on Hoover. We'll carry on the debrief, but at the end we were going to put up our email addresses anyway. So if there's any, you know, afterwards, if there's any questions or anything, and we're very happy to just, you know, PDF up a couple of the processes and email it to you. So one way or another, if you want it, we can get it to you. Okay, so I've seen in the chat, I've got this is fantastic, learning so much, and loads of unexpected things came out. So I am highly curious about what people are learning or what fantastic things came up.
please do share. It really is more than likely it will end up being the highlight of the session for someone else. So what you say will you know, relate so closely to them.
Oh, we've got
Okay,
Debbie.
excellent.
Hello, sorry, it's me again.
Don't be sorry. It was a great sharing last time.
Yeah, what do you know now?
I thought, as I put that comment of there was loads of unexpected things, I better actually explain what it was. So really, I mean, Liz did an amazing job of just pulling stuff out of me and getting me to commit, which was brilliant. And we realised that actually the things that were stopping me doing this thing was exactly the same as the things that were stopping me doing the last thing. But the reasons behind it were really different. And the reasons behind it were actually went a lot deeper of why it was important to me, which I always thought was quite surface level. Actually, there's some really deep rooted values about being a role model to my daughter. And that's why I want to do it. It's not because I want to do it for me and the surface stuff. It was actually, you know, I want to be a role model for her and realise that she can step into her power and be an incredible woman, and this is what it looks like, and it's okay to love yourself. And so so loads of really kind of like really deep things for me came out, which I wasn't expecting on that exercise. So yeah, that's what I thought I'd share.
That's fantastic. The whole thing that we tend to use the same old patterns, you know, for everything under the sun. Really does seem to be the case. And the nice thing about that is that if you get that pattern, so you know about it and you can have some choice around it, then you more than likely can copy and paste all of that knowing and choice into other contexts where you use that pattern. So that sounds really good. I also liked your thing about realizing there was some deep-seated values. Those questions about and what's important to you about the last thing the person said, and then ask it again about their now new answer and so on, leads you to higher and higher, or deeper and deeper, more important values each step of the way. And you can get to the meaning of life in the universe in, well, I don't know, 7-8 questions often. So it is all by itself a really valuable thing, a little process that you can use in the kind of coaching context or for yourself. Get clear about what your values are at work, and it'll make it much easier to search for a new job because you'll be much clearer about what's important and not negotiable for you. So
and interestingly, as a coach, looking at the questions when you first put them up, I thought, well, that's going to feel awkward. You know, that's going to feel a bit awkward repeating the question, you know, 7 times. But actually, it wasn't awkward at all. It felt really natural and really normal to do. As the coach and the receiver, it didn't feel, even though I knew what was going to happen, it was scripted. I didn't feel like it was scripted, which is really nice to know.
Yeah, I think because one's going for stuff that they care about, their client cares about their values, they can't be bothered to use up neurons noticing that you're just repeating the same question a number of times. It gets them too much into reflecting on their own stuff, which is exactly what we want. We want them to self-model and get curious about themselves and their patterns. So yeah, it becomes a perfect way forward.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, how are we doing?
Yeah, as I just mentioned, just so you can pick up across what we've done. So one of the things with mindscams, and it's to do with the scaling, is there can be like a motivation. Like in the moment, you're really motivated to eat the chocolate that's in front of you. We did 2 things. One was the repeating, then what happens, then what happens, then what happens, on like to find out the consequences. And what generally happens is someone gets something that ends up quite bad over time. And then that'll be a motivation sort of away from that problem. And when we're doing the values, you're touching into something that's really important. And if it's really important for someone, it's probably very motivating sort of towards them. So just those two, the repeating question processes, but both are really, really handy to get at a bit of motivation. So what we did with the mind scans is at least give you a couple of ways of getting at like a negative and positive motivation that might help to somehow balance out that desire for chocolate in the moment. Everyone's going to go and eat chocolate after this. I've said it so many times. Sorry.
It's something that's important about what we're doing there in relation to what Paul's talking about is that the two kinds of realizations that seem to be most important for people to get on and make a change are they need to be clear that making that change is important to them. So anything you can do that can help them to appreciate that it's important will, as Paul's been saying, be more motivating, and they're more likely to hang in there and do it. And the other kind of realization is a confidence one. They need to get some confidence that they could succeed in making the change. So anything that you can ask them that would help them to notice that, you know, they do have some ideas about how to do it or resources they could tap into, that sort of thing, is also a good thing to do when you are wanting to encourage someone to make a change, which should mostly be when they want to make the change, but they just haven't yet got to a point of being fully committed. So it's this, we're not telling you this stuff so you can manipulate people. It's about supporting them to make changes that they are choosing to make.
Ooh. Right, we're coming up quite near the end. Have we time for another quick thing? We've got a couple of things we want to say right at the end. If anyone's got a very quick share.
Yep.
Okay.
So, and Paul, there's nothing from the chat that we need to comment on?
People saying some nice things. We've got very good and helpful exercise about self-modeling. Great exercises. Looking forward to the handout. I'll definitely be practicing this with my clients. And when prompted to consider how powerful the last question, I realized there's such a flow going on thanks to the previous questions, allowing a genuine answer to come up. And we had, I felt a huge shift take place, going to a completely new level. Thank you for this process. Really good.
Grand. There's certainly going to be no lack of opportunity to use it with clients if that's what you're wanting to do, because these mind scams are going on left, right, and center all the time. Anytime you work with someone, they appear to have got what they need to make a change, and then they're back again the next week not having done it, or the next month or the next year. Chances are there's something mind scammy going on, and well worthwhile doing some paying attention in the way we have today.
Yeah. Oh, and I had one little thing, as I said, about the ways in which we're creating the change. One was through the two motivations. Actually, just having attention on these underlying processes, just on what's going on for someone. The fact they just have to have a look, or in some way experience that distracting or that blurring things out. Just having attention on it can sometimes be enough for people, quite often be enough for people to make the change. You don't always have to do anything like a clever technique. It's just like almost the truth and the reality of what's going on for someone, that they kind of suddenly, they can come up with very creative ideas for what they're going to do about it. Or they can come up with even more devious mind scams. It's kind of half of one or the other, you know.
Okay, let's then move to finishing off. So I think Paul has a slide with our email addresses, and you are very welcome to contact either of us. I think you can probably tell we're quite interested in the stuff that we do, so it's not a hardship to interact as far as this sort of thing is concerned, and we can certainly send the the processes along to that or the handout so that you have that.
Yeah, so we haven't written the activities into the handout. It was just a list of mind scams. So if you want the activities, just drop us a line and we can like put in the little processes we did. If you didn't take a screenshot or anything, very happy to do that.
We do trainings, as we said, and we do some taster sessions for clean language. So if you are interested in stuff to do with clean language, drop us a line. We are doing a taster session on the 19th of May, which is Wednesday next week, and there'll be another one not long after that. So these are complimentary, so there's no money to pay, and we'd love to have you join us. So just let us know and we'll add you to the little list. We're also starting module 1 of the clean language training soon. So if you are interested in that, let us know and we'll send you some details. And we'd be delighted to add you to our newsletter list if you wanted that. So let us know and we'll do all those things. If you want to tell us how you got on with your mind scam going forward, that would be interesting to us as well. Okay, are there any last minute questions? We've got, I think, a whole minute to answer them. So speak now or email us. Okay. Well then, I think for us to say a big thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Yeah, and thank you to the people who shared as well, because that always gives us a chance to add in extra things that we don't think of in the session. It makes it really live. So thank you for doing it. So it's a bit brave doing it in front of 40 odd people, but so thank you for doing that.
Excellent. You go well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Wendy and Paul. That was an incredible session. You guys took it all in your stride, despite some of the hiccups we had with breakout rooms. So thank you so much for that. Just looking at the comments, absolutely inspirational. I know clean language certainly has made a huge shift in my coaching, and I did a course on it many, many years ago now, but hugely valuable. So thank you so much for your teaching and your sharing. The handouts will be available. We think there's a technical glitch due to the fact that there's more than one speaker for some reason, but that will become available on Hoover. So you can come back at any time and pick up those handouts. So apologies for that. Thank you to everybody who shared your stories, and your feedback is so hugely appreciated for our learning. If you're watching this on the playback, you can post your questions in the chat or the Q&A section, and Paul and Wendy would be delighted to answer them over the next coming months. And check out the chat for their emails if you want to get in touch with their amazing training. So thank you very much, Paul and Wendy.
Thank you, Gail.
Oh, thank you.
You and your other helpers in the background for all the support. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. See you again soon.